This episode is sponsored by Acceptly. Want to get into the college of your dreams? Check out acceptly.com. Acceptly takes the guesswork out of the application process by guiding you step by step through it. You will know exactly what step to take when and receive the resources you need at each step. Get extra guidance from professional college counselors. And best of all, it's entirely free. So go and check out Acceptly today at acceptly.com and follow them on Twitter at Acceptly. Please thank Acceptly on Twitter for their support of EdUKWEST. So, hi everyone, welcome. This is Review Ed. I'm Kirsten Winkler and I am joined by Gianmarco Masoni of Einztein, and we do the holiday sort of episode of Review Ed, and so therefore, and sort of seeing it's the 23rd, close to noon over there. Thanks for taking the time and talking with me through the topics of the week today. Still.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kirsten.
Everybody of you who want to know more about what Gianmarco with his company Einztein does, you should check out the EdUKWEST episode 85 from about, I think, roughly 2 weeks ago, and you will get a more detailed idea of what they do and what they are building. And of course, we also have later on in the show one of your guest pieces, or your first guest piece you wrote for EdUKWEST, and let's talk about this just in a short moment. Sure. So let's start off with, I would say, one of the most controversial topics in tech, internet generally today, so the Stop Online Piracy Act, otherwise also known as SOPA. And I'm sure almost everybody who works on and with the internet is familiar with this sort of infamous topic. But, and I mean, of course, we're also an educated audience on EdUKWEST, so most people will know and will be familiar with and probably have their opinion already, but for everybody who doesn't know yet, so to put it very briefly, so SOPA is basically an initiative for a new law saying infringing, pirating, and or counterfeiting material when it's found on a website by either the copyright owner or the government. Then, if the domain name is in the United States, it can be cut off the internet, sort of be deleted from the search engines. And when you are like we outside of the States, they can and probably will somehow at least cut the connection with the States. And so the current state of affairs is that it's delayed until the end of January, but somehow we want to go in our first article and discuss how SOPA might actually potentially put in danger this whole open education resource movement. And sort of in the article, I think it is described quite well. Basically, open education movements and sites are amassing a lot of data, curated and put on the site by various different people, and of course the vast majority of people is honorable. They want to do a good thing and make education available and accessible to many more people, as many people as possible. But certainly you always have, when you are on the internet, a very short minority of people who might have not so honorable or good intentions, and is almost any time the case. So with SOPA, if only, in the worst case scenario, if only one little piece of information or content is found on one of those sites, they could actually be shut down without any notification before, so they are just cut from the internet. What's your take on this story? Quite worrying, or?
Certainly it's worrying to us, but I think it should be worrying to anybody in the education community, not those who only work with open educational resources. Education, by its very nature, is about sharing knowledge and skills and building on what people have done before you and are doing around you. So anything that chills that process is going to hamper the educational process. I mean, take the example of a high school student who puts together a wiki for a course and shares content that he or she has found on the internet through that wiki, with the objective of collaborating on an activity that's related to the course. This could potentially, in fact, as far as I understand it, this would fall directly under SOPA. And so what would happen? Well, that wiki could be brought down, could be shut down by the federal government, maybe by ISP. And that's just one small example. And we're not talking about OER necessarily there. It could be a student at a public school who's just innocently doing this.
Anyone with the best intentions, yeah.
Right. So I think there's an effort to put this to present this as a battle between the gated content keepers, the keepers of gated content, and those who want content to be free. But I think it goes way beyond that. And that's why it's just overreaching. At the very least, there needs to be a nice, safe harbor for education, and probably this is just the wrong approach to dealing with the legitimate issue of piracy.
I think generally, yes, SOPA, or the way it presents itself at the moment, is, yes, a bad idea. I am also afraid that somewhat people are working on it, approving or voting for and against it, who don't necessarily know the tech space, and sometimes I feel also don't make the effort to understand. So although I have to say, up to now, and of course this is an issue we are all concerned with, I am also missing from the technology side, if at all possible. I mean, there's not another proposal how to maybe either modify, or a new proposal how to do things. And I think it's incredibly difficult because we are dealing with bits and bytes, and but somehow, even though SOPA is bad, but somehow, of course, the general idea. So to maybe need something.
Yeah, we need an alternative. I think everybody's just hoping that this doesn't get through Congress, and if it does get through the Senate, the president can veto it, and we'll put this issue to rest. But I don't think it's going to go away, because the players on both sides are powerful and have money to lobby for this. So that actually, what you raise is interesting, because it might be that the solution, a third way, if you will, can come out of the education community, the people who understand education, understand technology. I know that there's the beginning of an effort in that direction, but we need to make perhaps a more concerted effort. So I think that's an excellent proposal. Why don't you come up with the alternative?
because it may need a person even more intelligent than my. I think it's an incredibly difficult issue, and so our second article is a list put on VentureBeat, and they released sort of the official list of SOPA supporters, and I am not so, let's say, surprised by finding obviously some of the companies that produce and manufacture actual goods, such as L'Oreal, who are, of course, even though I still don't understand that even those companies support SOPA, but I can somehow follow their mindset of that naturally they are against counterfeiting and piracy of their products. The same is true for almost all of the big record companies, Universal, Warner Music. Of course, they support. I am more surprised to see some of the education companies, as they are not so many of them. So namely, of course, Pearson, also McGraw-Hill Education, Macmillan, Hachette, HarperCollins. So the big publishers. On the other hand, they also invested in startups or bought startups on the internet, still being pro-SOPA. Is this maybe even more alarming to us than some of the established companies? We can sort of at least follow their mindset and their motivation why maybe they are in favor of SOPA.
Well, I think you point out that the education community is not monolithic. And what you're seeing is not so much people in education, motion pictures, recording industries on one side and other industries or spaces on the other side. It's really at the heart of this, underpinning all of this, is a fight between business models. And that's really what it comes down to. It's kind of fascinating in a sense, because you've got the old traditional business models, which is create content, put a price on it, sell it, and new business models, which are about using all the technology available to make content as open and accessible as possible, and then figuring out, okay, how do we turn this into a business model? How do we monetize this? It's one mentality versus another. So you could say there are legitimate grievances on both sides. That's why one struggles. It would be nice to see both sides come to the table and say, okay, we understand your point of view. Let's work out a compromise. Maybe that's what needs to happen.
I think a compromise that works for both sides would, of course, be the ideal solution. On the other hand, isn't it like in the moment you come on the internet and you create something on the internet, that there will always automatically be a certain percentage, a certain number of people who take your stuff and who
repurpose it?
Isn't that somewhat natural, and you cannot limit it, and you cause yourself tremendous headache if you think of what might happen to your content or to your stuff. So, for example, for EdUKWEST, I took the decision to post it under Creative Commons for non-commercial use. So, yeah, it might be a little bit different, and also my feelings might be different when I see somebody using the videos and make money off themselves. Although, on the other hand, with video, it's maybe a little easier than with like written text, because I'm still in the video and I am speaking just like the other part, my interviewee. So they cannot cut this part out, as this is basically the content. So I feel maybe a little bit less uncomfortable, and I can sort of understand both parties here. Those who think I still don't want to give up the right to say what happens to my content, and I'm pro with this group. On the other hand, I can also understand the people saying, look, it's on the internet, and from there you cannot really control what happens.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, also, to say the internet is we're pigeonholing things a bit. I go back. I always think about my kids. All right, they don't really think. They're very young, but my guess is as they grow older, this idea of the internet is going to maybe even disappear. It's going to merge because they're accessing the internet through all kinds of different devices. And when you get the internet on TV, when you get on the internet, quote unquote, through a phone, through a tablet, what is the internet at that point? It's just part of the way that we communicate. When you make a phone call, you don't think of the telephone line or the telephone system. It's just so. It's a really tough one because kids now are adapting to a way of interacting with content that is highly sophisticated, highly creative, and demands of them that they really engage with it in such a way that they shape it and make it their own. I mean, the best games out there, the best content out there, allows children and students to take the story and inhabit it and play and mold the characters. So at what point does that content become theirs versus belonging to the game maker? There's some really tough questions, and I think you mentioned it before. The people who are handling them now are people who have grown up in a different era. And my guess is that we maybe come up with a set of laws that we think work for the system that we have in place now, albeit some people will be unhappy. And we find that in a few years, those laws are basically obsolete because of the reality of what people are doing. Yeah. Because no matter what laws we come up with, we're going to find that people find outlets to do the things they want to do. So
it seems to be a human behavior, natural behavior, yeah.
Exactly. You can only legislate behavior so much and regulate it. And that's what I meant by, I think we kind of pigeonhole things talking about the internet.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Our next story is something very dear maybe to your heart. The Mozilla Open Badges project or initiative, and you told me in our interview that with Einztein you are thinking of maybe how to work together on the project. Can you tell us a little bit more what Mozilla intends to do and how you see how Einztein could come and both ends benefit from that?
Well, Mozilla is leading an effort, along with some other organizations, to establish a badge ecosystem. So essentially almost like a set of standards that could be used so that badges could be assigned to students or learners who demonstrated an aptitude in a certain area. Now, what's interesting about this, you go, okay, well, isn't that already going on? This has a lot to do with, I think, the future direction of learning, which is blended learning. Because badges aren't web-based only. I mean, they might start out that way, but they don't reflect only web-based activity. They can, but they don't necessarily have to. So you could have some really interesting scenarios. And one of the partners that is involved in this effort, or one of the companies that successfully applied for a grant to develop the badge ecosystem for their own purposes, really fascinates me. It's called Design for America. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, I'm always happy to talk about Einztein, but I think what they're doing is really fascinating because they basically their goal is to make design something that is local, mm-hmm. so that you take a local problem, you find a solution to it, and that solution may be elaborated collaboratively, offline and online, or through a combination of online and online and offline activities. Why is this important? Because a lot of times students find themselves studying in a void. And in the case of design, this is particularly important because there's so many design problems that need solutions in the real world that this is having students work on actual problems is a perfect way of benefiting them, but also benefiting the person who or the institution that has a problem. So, for instance, one of the examples they use is there is a problem with lack of hygiene in hospitals. That leads to the #1 transmission of bacteria and sicknesses. So they had design students work on that and come up with a product that is now going through the patent process. Mm-hmm. Now, those design students may be doing this through their undergraduate programs, or they may be doing it completely outside the undergraduate programs. They may be 10-year-olds or 15-year-olds. So what do you do to make sure that they get credit, they get mm-hmm. recognition for their efforts which have been successful? Enter badges. You give them badges that demonstrate they achieved a competency here and an actual result. Yeah. And so that's really exciting.
I think, yeah, please go on.
No. So I was going to say one other example that I love also is iCivics. iCivics is an online, for the most part, online-based civics education program. They use games to get middle school students, high school students to better understand the role of citizens, their responsibilities, mm-hmm. etc. Mm-hmm. Well, ever since introducing badges, even before working with Mozilla, they experienced a 30% increase in the use of their content. That's huge. So badges are really starting to take hold in the education space. I think where it gets really interesting, we could talk about it a little bit later if you don't want me to rush into it, but where it really gets interesting is when you look at companies like TutorSpree. Mm-hmm. Here you have, okay, TutorSpree is like the Airbnb for tutors. Mm-hmm. So it helps you match students with tutors in the real world. They meet one-on-one. They say, this mm-hmm. tutor was great, and they tell other people about it, and that tutor's reputation rises. And eventually TutorSpree will have online tools as well, hence the blended learning approach. Well, do you see a place for badges in this? I certainly do. Badges could be used because a lot of those students, according to TutorSpree, aren't necessarily enrolled in schools. That's very, very interesting. So wouldn't it be nice if they could earn badges for their work with tutors? And might that not give rise to rock star tutors? Tutors who are so good that maybe they can create their own videos, their own courses, and suddenly we see a threat to the established route mm-hmm. of PhD and working your way through the publication nightmare, getting recognized by your peers, getting a position at a university, and being recognized as a great professor. So this is potentially a highly disruptive technology, and fascinating.
Yeah, I think mostly, of course, from the motivation when being in a non-institutional environment, with all the exciting things, exciting companies and material and content they provide, and people can even and already today or for some years now really learn with those materials and improve. The thing up to now has been how do I actually prove my knowledge? So this is, I feel, still sort of the big advantage when being in the traditional system and associated with college or university and higher education. In the end, you get your degree. Whereas the person, it is changing, but so far the person who might have exactly the same knowledge, maybe even better, but what employer today makes the decision purely based on I can prove I can do this. Yeah, maybe in developing developers coding there it's easier. The more traditional the job, I think the more traditional is also the decisions being taken, and so therefore I think badges for the engaging part, as you pointed out, but also for the part to say, I actually have knowledge in that sector or field, and I can prove this now. That's really for the informal learning space, lifelong learning, which starts very early, and we all know that only 20% is actually classic or education or knowledge gained in the most classic way, and 80% is informal learning. So this is really, I think, an exciting trend, and hopefully we make good steps forward in 2012 and then the next years to come.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
And there are many issues that need to be sorted out, without a doubt. But certainly Mozilla and the others involved have the wherewithal to push for this. So I'm anxious to see what they come up with. But we will be working alongside that effort.
Great. A little bit related. So the MIT just launched MITx due to the popularity of their OpenCourseWare project, and I think I read that's online for 10 years now, so it seems like in internet years such a long time. Yeah, like forever. And so they believe that they want to explore even more of the opportunities that teaching and learning online provides, with new tools and free online courses, with sort of now the new twist, accessible to everybody, but those courses will apparently lead to a certification at the end. And sort of there I can see that we can make the connection with just our previous topic, that even being in a more free environment and depending on your own how to learn things, still that us, but also institutions, companies, sort of see this necessity or value addition in providing their students and the learners then with a certification.
It's what MIT is doing at MITx is very interesting. Let me just step back a moment. MIT is the pioneer in OpenCourseWare. And as a result of their efforts, successful to translate their courses into online content that was freely available, the OpenCourseWare movement gained momentum, and many other schools now provide their courses free of charge. The problem's always been this, that these courses are free of charge, but it's really their content. And so, again, how do I actually absorb that content? Who tells me the right thing or wrong thing? I mean, it's great because these are world-class lectures and documents that I can go through and or I could even use in my classroom to supplement what I am doing with my students. But there's no way of supervising. There's no formal process. There's no one supervising it. There's no nothing at the end that says I did it and I took structural engineering and I got a good score on it. So that's really been the criticism of OpenCourseWare. But on the other hand, how do you deal with this? I mean, it costs money to do all the things that are lacking, and as it is, offering OpenCourseWare really requires dedication of resources on the part of universities that sometimes they simply don't have. So, what did MIT do? Well, MIT basically, they've come up with, although it's interesting, they made the announcement, but it hasn't been released yet, but what they're coming up with is what they call MITx, an open learning infrastructure. What we have to bear in mind is that this is actually dual purpose. While being an infrastructure that can be used for their OpenCourseWare, and in fact for anyone else's, because they're going to make it available as open source for other universities to use, while serving that purpose, so that you can take a course that's free, and then maybe at the end you can get some kind of certification for that. It also serves MIT for their own residential program. There's nothing wrong with that, but it goes back to what I was saying, that the future is in blended learning. Because what MIT found was that a lot of their students, maybe because they missed a lecture or because they need to hear that lecture again or hear it from someone else who give a different take on it, they engage with that free content. I don't know what the percentage is, but in a high enough number that MIT looked at this and said, hey, if we want to make this a better experience, more interesting experience, more productive experience for our own students, then we should develop an open learning infrastructure around this content that can also be used by our students. And for our students, it may not be open, it may be closed. It'll be part of what they pay for when they come to MIT. So it's you know, let's just bear that in mind, and that's good because it means that this has a chance of surviving, not being just an innovative technology that gets announced, gets released, and then dies on the vine.
That's it, and we're never gonna hear about it anymore in the future. Yeah.
Exactly. And one other thing that I think is interesting about this is, as you know, many universities, and this goes back to a point you made, have extension programs, and those tend to be the most lucrative one. At Harvard, I believe the extension program is for-profit, whereas the rest of the school is not for-profit. Makes them a lot of money. The only issue there is dilution of their brand name. And at some point, they have to worry about people going around saying, I got a degree from Harvard. Why do I mention this in the case of MIT? Because MIT is trying to nip this in the bud, and they have clearly stated, who knows, maybe they'll change their minds, that the certificates that get issued will not bear the MIT name. They will set up a different nonprofit, a different name, and so the certificate, I'm sure, will have some prestige attached to it, but it will have a different name. So just an interesting note.
That's an interesting note, as just like you said, on the one hand, I see universities experimenting with, let's call their classic on-campus students, mingling with people who take the open courseware and educational material and let them interact on the internet, with the implication, what you said. Is it good for the brand name, or what is the impact? And I think in the years to come, people or universities, prestigious universities, have to think about that increasingly. On the other hand, yesterday I talked with TwoDoor. So basically, if you know, they provide universities with online social network administration tools to basically have their courses or master programs brought online, each university or just one university in each vertical. And so Jeremy told me that they sort of make sure with the university that they only accept students online who would also have gone through the process offline. So basically to make sure that the level is guaranteed. And although of course the program is then paid, so it's a little bit different than the other scenario. But I think somehow the discussion must be between the two ends I just described, and it will be a very interesting challenge to see what for-profit universities then also do as their brand name guarantee them to make a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what they have, the brand, and they lose that. Then they lost.
Yeah.
It's just everything really, because professors go to teach because of that brand, students go to etc. Yeah. So it will be interesting.
Next article was a rather good, I found, article on ZDNet, basically discussing 5 EdTech developments of 2011 that weren't. And maybe we won't go through all of them. Let me pick maybe one. If you want to talk about another, that's fine as well. So first one, Android. So didn't really take off and is much discussed in the tech community as well, of course. Most education companies, and I can understand, say we start with iOS, we have Android in the planning. Naturally, it is, due to its openness, more complicated as we have a plethora of devices. Not every version you even develop for Android is then compatible with another Android device. So it's sort of, even though the total numbers of Android phones sold worldwide are now more than Apple devices, iPhones sold, however, is their openness sort of also their problem to really say, as a developer, I can make money on the Android marketplace. And in education, I mean, I can understand you want that everybody in your class or of your students also online can use this version you recommended. So is this the big issue with Android, or do you see other problems, other implications?
I honestly, I think for me it's not. It's a debate, but it's a non-debate. I think it gets sorted out. I know that's kind of a vague response, but I do think this will get sorted out in the next year, 2 years. And what I find more interesting is the notion that you can access content through a multiplicity of platforms. This is what I think. I think that I always go back to the way that my kids or the way anyone else's kids or the way the younger generation, I say younger because they're the true digital natives, the way they naturally use technology is going to guide us as to what we need to do in terms of Android or any other technical issue or issue in the technology area. And the example for me is I see students who do not own a Kindle, downloading a Kindle app and accessing the same book from a computer, from a laptop, from an iPad, from a phone. And what's amazing about it is they read up to page 59 on one device, then skip to another device, and pick up on page 60, and it keeps track of that for them. Okay, so whatever people are discussing as far as the problems of Android, for me, doesn't matter. What we need to look at are what are the opportunities as far as that kind of use is concerned. Because I think when it comes, coming back to education, when it comes to education, what's fascinating is, well, that's what we should be doing, allowing people to access a course through any device in any way possible. So I'm not a technologist. I mean, I am in technology, but I'm not the coder. I think the people who wear the programming hats and the people who put the money in this and the people who have the wherewithal to make the changes need to just figure it out and make this a non-issue, a non-debate, because we need to adapt to where things are already headed. So
yeah, as you said, that the kids probably don't make the difference for themselves anymore. I am now in this ecosystem and now I'm heading over to another one. For them is all the same. It's basically the online world. They are consuming, learning, they simply are in.
yeah.
And it is just for us, maybe for business aspects for some people, maybe because we are older, for some other ones of us, that we think in those like more islands probably. So I am on the whatever iOS, or I am in the Apple world, I'm in the Android world, or generally on the internet. So yeah, probably that for the younger generation, this is not even, yeah, as you said, an issue.
Yeah, it is an issue for the people who are, for Android developers, for Google, but they should figure out how to make it a non-issue. That's my point. And the opportunities are so huge that it will become a non-issue soon enough. It has to.
So you have young kids. I don't know if your eldest daughter is in school or preschool already. So what's it like? Because one of the other points in the article was that bring your own device. So this bring your own device movement allowed by teachers. Parents are encouraged to give their kids a device, and then they bring it to school so that they can use it, and so eventually everybody has one or the other device to use in class. Is this in your circles due to economic downturn, and maybe also having not so privileged kids mixed with more, well, kids from a wealthier background, let's say, together in one class? Is this really an issue, or how do you see, does almost every kid nowadays has one or the other device?
Well, this is, I read about that, and it gave me pause. I mean, I've worked with schools all over the country, and a lot of these schools, you have a spectrum. You've got schools in disadvantaged communities that have received grants, and so they have the wonderful computer labs, and then it turns out that they don't have the technician who can do the upkeep on the computers, or the teachers aren't properly trained in the use of the computers, and or they can't get the educational materials because there's a disconnect between the technology and the actual education material, access to the education materials. Because a lot of school districts are very paranoid, I guess is the term, very cautious about allowing access to just any education materials. So there's a whole spectrum. There's other schools where they can only go to the computer lab once every 2 weeks or once a week.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice to say, well, the solution is you have students bring their own device, and for those who don't have a device, you provide them with one. And maybe that will be a partial solution. I don't think it is a complete solution, and I don't think it's a solution that's going to really be prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think by the time we figure that out, we'll have figured out how to create a tablet that costs under $100 and does all the things it needs to do.
It will be interesting to see what happens with this famous Indian $55 tablet. So
right,
yeah,
right. That is one. It may fail, but there will be others who try, or it may, in the next iteration of its product, succeed. Once you figure that out, then the economics just make it clear that you should be delivering content electronically, because it costs a heck of a lot more to kill trees and deliver them through printed matter. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not so much of a big fan of having a computer laboratory, as I feel that's somehow artificial, and let the kids go, okay, now this hour, this week we go in this room, and you have access to computers when they have, at least many of them, in their normal life, everyday life, in one or the other way, access to various different devices and technologies, and use it on an everyday basis. And on the other hand, I think the point you mentioned, and also the article mentions, of course, the educator side, sometimes sort of feeling I have to do something with technology, but only add a tiny layer of technology and wrap the old way of teaching somewhat in it, which is of course not the ideal solution as well.
No, and teachers really struggle with that because they just don't have the training and the use of the new technologies, and there are new ones developed every day, and so and they also struggle with the challenge of, okay, I teach in a classroom. I mean, that's still where most of the teaching takes place at the K-12 level. So how am I supposed to be making sure that they are achieving digital literacy inside the classroom when they're already doing all kinds of stuff outside the classroom with their own devices, but I don't have the tools inside the classroom? It's a struggle. Yeah. But I really think that we're gonna we're moving to a time, and I just go back to what I've said a couple times. We're moving to a time where we stop looking at online teaching versus offline teaching. It's all blended learning. It's all some degree of blended learning. And I know that's a huge, a very general term in and of itself, but it's basically you stop categorizing something as having to take place in one world or another, because the two worlds are merging.
That's very right. Was it surprising for you, coming to the next complex of mobile learning, data usage, texting? Was it surprising that today's teens don't use their smartphones for actually making phone calls, but really and in massive amounts every month? Predominantly use it for texting and for reasons that it's easier, so more convenient, also more fun than actually speaking to my friend. So in 2012, or almost 2012, taking a technology or a feature in our smartphones that has existed for the last, let's say, 15 years.
It wasn't surprising. It was a good reminder, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when you work in the tech sector, even though you don't consider yourself a technologist, what we're doing is technology related. Mm-hmm. You sometimes get caught up in this this sense that you need to develop the latest, greatest thing, use latest, greatest technology to solve a problem. And sometimes you end up developing a product that's in search of a problem using a new technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go to tech conferences, you see that all the time.
Yeah.
Here's an example of a popular technology that is solving a problem, which is the problem of how to make, as you said, communication easy, democratic, cheap, mm-hmm. fun, etc. Now, we should be thinking about how to apply that, in this case, to education, where there's a whole myriad of problems. And why I say it's not so surprising, it's because I've given it some thought, but also because a few months ago we got a call, this is in my Einztein capacity, from a huge telecom company in a developing country, mm-hmm. one of the developing countries in the world. And they were interested in learning more about us, and we took it as an opportunity to learn more about them. Mm-hmm. And what they were telling us was all the things that we already we just discussed, which is that not only do teenagers use text more than anything else, mm-hmm. but these countries, everyone's using text. And so they've already started to look at and have piloted programs to use that technology, not in isolation, but to use it, really make it central to their efforts to deliver different educational materials and experiences to their subscribers. Why do they do this? Well, in part they do it because they recognize they have, it's a sense of civic duty, I suppose. But the other is that it's a business opportunity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the problems that they have, and one of the reasons they came to us, but this is just because it's interesting, is that there's a lack of teachers who are well qualified to do the teaching in a lot of these more remote areas. And even though most of the population lives in urban areas, it's also a problem in the urban areas, because not all teachers there are automatically great. So they were looking at how do we take people who have proven themselves to be good teachers and put them in this pipeline so that they can help teach a greater number of students. They won't be the alternative, but they will be they will supplement the teaching that goes on in a classroom. And I found that really, really fascinating. And it goes to things like TutorSpree, and those kinds of developments, which is to find teachers in unexpected places or even expected places and kind of just let the users decide who are the ones that we should be paying a little bit more attention to and why. So,
yeah, that's truly fascinating when you also take this as a reminder, as you said, try also in our mindset of always moving forward. We need a new technology. I need to buy this device. Then a few weeks later is almost not outdated, but there is a new one with whatever then latest application. And when you then try to immerse yourself in what they take as a basic technology, I am sometimes also, just as a side note, amazed how many people actually consume entire books on a normal cell phone, so not even a smartphone screen or even iPad or other tablet device, and really read it, and it seems to work for them. And also in those developing countries, what we see making their payments via text message. I think this is very creative. And then, of course, for education, how can I give and provide somebody in a remote space with, however, good educational content? And yeah, they all seem to have access to not the latest mobile phone, but to a cell phone, and extensively use it. And I think us in the States, but over here in Europe it's not so much different. Yeah, we move forward too quickly and don't concentrate enough of getting the most out of a technology, but sort of think, that's a few months old now, so I really need to get the newest thing on the market.
Right. Well, and I think this mindset also traps us sometimes when it comes to the delivery, the content that we create for delivery purposes. Let me explain. If you're, as you correctly pointed out, in many developing countries, they skip the whole banking system infrastructure, physical infrastructure of having a bank that you do, there's a teller, because it just doesn't make sense, and technology allows them to essentially do the same thing via simple phones. Now, if you're talking about delivering some kind of education to that person, whether that person is a K-12 or an adult learner, in all likelihood they're going to be more interested in a kind of course that has really practical applications for them. I'm not saying only those courses, but say a course that teaches them how to budget for their shopping at the local market, how to negotiate the best prices, how to determine what is a good price for the produce they're buying based on what is being charged in markets nearby. All those kinds of courses, I think, need to be really thought through and developed, because those are the kinds of courses that are going to change the world and attract people. Those are the kinds of courses that can be really delivered to masses of people, I dare say not just in developing countries, but in developed countries, because we want education to have practical applications. Obviously, it doesn't mean you're always going to be studying basic stuff, but we want to know, what do I do with it? What can I do with it? How will it get me a job? How will it help me advance my career? And I think that's where technology comes back to content. So we need to think less in terms of the highbrow stuff and cool cutting-edge stuff, and think of the basics. Basic technology, fundamental skills, and knowledge.
I agree that the hands-on part plays such an incredibly important role. Of course, you need the people, the visionaries with the big ideas. What could we do without them? But I think the impact, and as you said, we are talking worldwide and how to change things. And there the hands-on essential technology can do such a great deal to make things better.
Absolutely.
Now onto something I found very interesting. Once again, the observations you make, like in your everyday life with your family and your kids, respectively. So, and in your post, you are elaborating and trying to figure out, playing with ideas on how the connected TV may become a reality and an importance for learning and education beyond, let's say, the good educational programs, but spreading into other verticals and other usage patterns as well, along with what Google's Eric Schmidt announced at Le Web in Paris earlier this month, that I don't know if he sort of was confused with the date, but that he said by mid-2012, so June, July, the majority of households will have a Google-enabled TV set. Yeah, so.
You know, whether it's Google enabled or not, for me, doesn't. I go back to it's not,
yeah, of course. But
it's not too meaningful to me. My TV set won't be Google enabled. I, in fact, have a nice TV that I bought before they had such a thing as a smart TV. So what I did was, for $100, I bought a Blu-ray player that is also allows me to access. I have a Samsung TV, Samsung apps. That then allows me to get on YouTube, allows me a degree of connectivity in terms of the content I can get on the internet, including Netflix, and those apps can just be rolled out, and there'll be new ones, I'm sure, as we move forward. So that's just an example how, okay, great. So there's going to be Google on my TV at some point. Okay. But it doesn't change the fact that kids in connected households, and I hate to use that term, but I guess we know that when we say connected household, it probably means that the parents are fairly involved and they allow their kids access to a number of devices, maybe too much so in some instances, but those devices including tablets like the iPad or phones or, in this case, the television. In connected households, kids, again, they just use whatever device is handy to get to the content that they're allowed to access and that they want to access. I have an iPad. I get Netflix on the iPad. Long ago, my 4-year-old daughter figured out how to use the Netflix app to get to videos. So she now browses videos and comes up with interesting ones. But what she did the other day, I wasn't prepared for. She got on YouTube, and because I'm trying to teach my kids Italian, she knows that, appreciates that. That's part of my culture. She watches little Einstein shows like that on TV, so she managed to find, and I still don't know how, because my wife did nothing, I did nothing to enable
to
this.
help or enable, yeah.
Yeah, little Einstein, not in English, because I could imagine that, in Italian. I don't know how it happened, but I was delighted. There she was, watching little Einstein in Italian. So, for me, it's not a matter of the internet. It's just a matter of there's ubiquitous access to content. Now, what we do with that ubiquitous access gives us both a responsibility and an opportunity. And the responsibility is we obviously have to make sure that the kids don't only have access to stuff that entertains, but also stuff that educates and helps their development in different ways. The opportunity is huge. I mean, and that's what I wrote about, because I noticed that there are efforts being made to use every televisions, which most everyone has, as a mode of delivering educational content. So even if you don't have Google TV or don't have any one of the other modes of getting internet on your TV, there are other solutions that are popping up in the developed and in the developing world. And that, for me, is really fascinating, and it takes us full circle kind of back to open educational resources and SOPA, and why it's so important that we take a balanced approach to this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the resources that are going to be available are going to be provided. I'll give you an example. Let's say an NGO, a museum, Smithsonian Institution. Okay? Actually, that's federally funded, so this is a great example. If you haven't been to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., for your unacquainted viewers, it's an amazing institution. It's many museums that have different areas that they focus on. It's all free. Now, the Smithsonian also happens to be a purveyor of great educational content on its websites. So what if I take that content and turn it into something, and then, or that content gets delivered through another site to my kids? Should we penalize that site even though they didn't make any money off of it necessarily? Should we shut them down so we force my kids to search out the Smithsonian and find that content? That's preposterous. That's something that should concern the people who have kids who support SOPA. So, anyways, all these things come back around.
Yeah. I think, of course, everything goes together with every other thing, and also maybe to what we talked about in the middle, that you have a sort of more classic device, such as a TV, known for a long time, although now we have smart TVs, if you will, but that could actually help for at least some families, as I suppose still today more families have a TV set at home compared with maybe an iPad 2 or maybe even a smartphone, so that it could actually bring internet and with it, as you said, educational content, if we let it flow freely, so anti-SOPA again, into everybody's home, which is a great and democratic thing.
Why don't we have a bunch of channels that offer educational content on different types of subject matter? You could have the 8 to 9 p.m. is on whatever channel is mathematics, basic mathematics, etc. Why aren't we doing that? I just, for me, that's where things have to go. Then we truly begin to revolutionize education, democratize it, and I think we have this effect where all of us rise as a result, and I would love to see that, and I guess that's why we're talking.
I love to see that too, and let's put it like this as a great closing statement, which only leaves it up to me to wish you Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays for you and together with your family, of course, and just enjoy the time together and a few days off from all the however exciting but also challenging work you are doing.
Well, it's exciting work, and I'm happy to be doing it. Happy New Year to you, and happy holidays to you as well.